Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission, as always, is to take complex source material investigative notes, articles, documents, and really pull out the core knowledge you need to understand a topic deeply. Today we're doing something a bit different. A unique, maybe unsettling forensic inquiry. We're looking at the architecture and the daily routines of the Ramsey residence in Boulder. And look, we're deliberately stepping away from the usual who-did-it loop. Our focus today is structural. It's about how the physical design of that house, combined with the family's habits, didn't just contain a crime, but how it actively enabled the concealment, delayed the discovery, and frankly amplified the chaos that followed. We're essentially treating the house itself as a silent character, a powerful one. Okay, let's unpack this. The goal here isn't just the emotional what happened. We want to drill down into the forensic why and how. How did this sequence of events unfold in that specific, very layered space?
Yeah, and that architectural lens is absolutely vital for any real insight, I think. We're looking at this intersection of criminology, psychology, and something you might call architectural geography. Basically how space shapes awareness and behavior. The sources really make it clear. The house wasn't just a box. It was an environment that created these incredibly effective zones of silence, of secrecy. And whoever was responsible, intruder or, someone else, they expertly exploited these vulnerabilities in the structure itself. And it forces us, the sources force us, to confront this really disturbing question. How close can you actually be? Under the same roof, just drywall and floorboards between you and something awful, and still claim genuine ignorance. Provable ignorance, maybe even deeper. How did the perpetrator use the family's own routines, their predictable movements, and the physical layout? How did they weaponize that space against them to maximize control?
Right. So let's start with the basics. The sheer scale and the layout of the place. This wasn't, your average suburban home. It was massive, highly compartmentalized, built for privacy, for separation. When you look at the floor plans, you don't just see rooms, you see wings, you see distinct zones, and these naturally created physical distance, sure, but maybe more importantly, psychological distance between the family members.
And the acoustic isolation. That's probably the single most critical physical fact here.
Yes, it wasn't just big, it was quiet, engineered quiet almost. Patsy Ramsey's own words in '98 are pretty striking on this. She said she could sometimes hear Burke because his bedroom was closer to theirs, but specifically stated she wouldn't hear her JonBenet go to the bathroom, despite being on the same floor, only a few yards separating them.
And we need to ask why. Why so silent? Architecturally, what caused that? Well, it wasn't a standard build, as you said. The size, yes, but also the density of the materials, the sheer distance between, say, the master suite and JonBenet's room or the basement. It meant the house just swallowed sound. Minor acoustic events, like a child moving quietly, a door clicking shut, completely buffered.
Designed to keep the outside world out.
Exactly. But in doing so, it also insulated them from each other massively.
And it wasn't just internal sounds, was it? It extended to major external noises, too. The sources confirmed they couldn't hear the garage door.
Yeah, the heavy automated garage door. From the master bedroom, they couldn't hear it open or close.
That's a huge detail. A garage door opening is usually one of the loudest, most distinct sounds in a house, a big mechanical cue.
And that fact is just...
Well, it undermines the whole idea of feeling secure in your own home, doesn't it? Think about our basic physiology. Our bodies rely on senses for warnings, right?
Yeah.
A sudden noise, a door slamming, that triggers a response. But in this house, the physical barriers were so effective, so sound dampening, that the stimuli needed to trigger that danger response. They just never penetrated the physical barriers.
The house muted the world.
Did. Even if someone was in a light sleep, sort of half aware, the necessary acoustic information to signal something's wrong, it just wasn't getting through. The architecture itself basically disabled the body's natural alarm system.
Which leads to that philosophical idea you mentioned earlier. The house didn't just separate rooms with walls.
It separated realities. That's the metaphysics of concealment we're talking about. The sources show how the structure allowed for these completely different experiences to happen simultaneously under one roof. Deep sleep upstairs.
Downstairs. Chaos, violence, staging, whatever was happening could unfold entirely undetected. This compartmentalization meant you could be in the house without being connected to everything happening within the house.
The silence gave permission for secrecy.
It's a terrifying thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
That physical closeness can coexist with total sensory isolation.
And that spatial limbo where something can happen without being registered, it leads us straight to the endpoint of concealment in this case. The wine cellar room. The characteristics of that room weren't random, were they?
Not at all.
John Ramsey's description is so vivid. A nasty room, usually full of Christmas stuff. Defined by neglect, by being storage. Patsy confirmed it. A space you just didn't go in there. Functionally and psychologically, it was a forgotten corner.
And that forgotten quality is exactly what makes it, from a forensic standpoint, nearly perfect for concealment. The person responsible, whether they lived there or knew the house intimately through planning, they understood spatial psychology. They knew people avoid unpleasant, dark, cluttered areas.
So the space itself provided cover, time.
Exactly. They could be confident a body wouldn't be found quickly, maybe hours, maybe even days, simply because checking that specific room wasn't part of anyone's normal routine.
But hang on, couldn't a really sophisticated intruder figure that out too? Someone who'd watched the house?
That's a fair question. It's central to the intruder versus insider debate, of course. But intimate familiarity gives a level of certainty that surveillance struggles to match. An outsider might guess a utility room is unused. A family member knows. They know the history of the space, when it was last used, the unspoken rules about not going in there. They leverage the family's own patterns of neglect against them.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
And think about the police search later. The perpetrator likely knew that even with police actively searching an outside team, unfamiliar with this specific quirky layout, they might logically prioritize living spaces. They might overlook a nasty storage room, especially initially. It's a calculated gamble, leveraging the house's unique features against the investigation itself.
The sources also hint at this idea of symmetry. Was putting the body in this dark, nasty, neglected room just practical? Or was there something symbolic? Like placing the dark, unspeakable act into a space that physically mirrored its awful, hidden nature.
I think that symmetry is really telling. It offers a glimpse into the psychological landscape of whoever did this. Whether they were consciously thinking this fits or not, the choice shows someone who knew the house's emotional geography, not just its physical layout. They matched the strategic need concealment with a kind of psychological resonance neglect, darkness.
Wow.
And this spatial strategy then provides a sort of blueprint for the psychological aftermath, doesn't it? If you assume, for argument's sake, family involvement.
Yeah.
The house's ability to just swallow secrets whole becomes a powerful metaphor for how the mind might compartmentalize unbearable knowledge.
Guilt, trauma.
Like building internal walls.
Exactly. Internal walls just as impenetrable as the physical ones.
Yeah.
The architecture didn't just enable the crime, it offered a model for denial, for carrying on afterwards. Okay, let's shift gears. From the place of concealment to the first signal, something was wrong. The ransom note. And the sheer precision of where it was left. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because this detail seems to cut right through to intimate knowledge of the family's moment-to-moment life.
Absolutely.
This note. Long, handwritten. It wasn't just left on the kitchen counter or taped to the door. It was specifically placed on the spiral staircase. The main artery of the house, the one the family themselves said they used 95% of the time.
The logic there is just, it's incredibly strong, isn't it? The placement screams intimate familiarity.
Yeah.
The writer knew the exact path Patsy would likely take first thing, where her eyes would fall, her likely state of mind waking up.
It's more than general knowledge.
Oh, far more. An outsider, even one who'd watched the house, might know there were multiple stairs, a main one, maybe a back one. But would they know which one was the family's default daily route, the one used 95% of the time? That's deep domestic rhythm knowledge. Only someone intimately familiar would bet on that specific staircase for guaranteed immediate discovery.
And Patsy's reaction just proves the point, doesn't it? She finds this folded paper on the stairs, and her first thought is, it's a note from the cleaning lady.
That one detail is incredibly revealing. It tells us that finding notes, domestic messages, instructions on that particular staircase was normal. It was part of the household routine.
So the perpetrator didn't just leave a note.
They weaponized normalcy. They exploited that existing pattern of communication on the stairs to ensure Patsy would pick it up casually, without alarm bells ringing instantly.
Ensuring maximum shock value only after she'd started reading it thinking it was something routine.
Precisely. It's a deliberate psychological manipulation achieved through knowing the space and the habits within it. They ensured the staging the ransom demand kicked off the moment the primary witness was least prepared, most vulnerable.
Let's talk about the physiological impact of finding that note like that. First thing in the morning, right there on the stairs, you called it a physiological bomb.
Absolutely. Imagine reading those first few lines.
Yeah.
The immediate realization of the threat. It floods your system. Adrenaline, cortisol, full fight or flight. And in that state, rational thought, careful observation, noticing inconsistencies, handling potential evidence properly, all of that is severely compromised.
Panic.
Total panic mode. And as we see in trauma situations all the time, you don't think carefully about inconsistencies. Crucial initial observations, forensic awareness, it's just bypassed by the overwhelming immediate panic.
So the placement wasn't just about being seen. It was about being seen under conditions of maximum emotional distress.
Exactly. To ensure maximum chaos and minimum clear thinking in those critical first moments.
Which fits with staging, right?
Perfectly.
Yeah.
From a criminological perspective, this level of precision, this reliance on intimate domestic knowledge, the choreographed chaos, it suggests someone wasn't just making a demand. They were actively trying to control the narrative from the very first moment.
Yeah.
Dictating the emotional and behavioral response. That's a hallmark of staged scenes designed to mislead.
And the note itself long, using supplies from the house.
Right, the pen, the pad, found within the house. It reinforces that connection to the environment. Environmental mastery.
And just circling back to the staircase itself, that spiral staircase, it was a feature, wasn't it? A symbol of their lifestyle, maybe.
Definitely. An expensive, distinctive architectural element, signifying affluence, a certain status.
And the perpetrator twists that symbol.
Completely. Transforms it into the epicenter of the nightmare. That mundane feature walked up and down countless times suddenly becomes this threshold between innocence and devastating knowledge.
The spiral, usually suggesting upward movement design.
Now symbolizes a journey downward into darkness and confusion. They took an element of the family status and turned it into the very instrument of their violation. The sanctuary turned against them, right at its core.
Which brings us back full circle to that core structural question. Given this house's ability to create parallel existences, sleep upstairs, horror downstairs, how do we assess who could have known what was happening in the basement? We've established that the architecture made genuine ignorance physically possible for those upstairs.
Yes, physically possible. But we need to move past a simple knowing versus not knowing. Awareness isn't always binary, especially when you factor in fatigue, pre-sleep states. We need to consider partial knowledge, suppressed knowledge. Could something, a sound, a subtle shift, have registered subconsciously but never fully broken through to conscious awareness?
Like background noise you filter out.
Sort of, but potentially more specific. And we have to factor in the state of, let's call it, exhausted routine.
Right.
The sources mention Patsy managing intense holiday logistics, late nights wrapping gifts, getting ready for early travel. That level of depletion creates what psychologists call perceptual vulnerability.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It means when your mind is running on fumes, focused on the immediate task list, stressed, your brain's filtering system gets kind of lazy. Minor anomalies, a floorboard creak downstairs, a muffled bump, things that might alert a rested mind are just dismissed by an exhausted one as noise. Irrelevant.
Because dealing with it would disrupt the need for sleep or the task at hand.
Exactly. The mind protects itself by minimizing disruptions. So something strange, something potentially concerning can just slide past conscious scrutiny because the system is prioritizing rest and routine completion.
So applying classic forensics here. Opportunity and capability.
Right.
Opportunity in a house like this, vast, quiet taste seems wide open. The layout provides opportunity for almost anyone physically present, even a hypothetical intruder who got inside. The size gives the stage.
Agreed. Opportunity is broad here.
But capability, that's the filter, isn't it? That's what forensic criminology really digs into.
That's the discriminating factor.
Capability means knowing the house intimately. Having access to specific materials, the tape, the rope, maybe even the pen and pad for the note. Having the emotional state to write that long, precise note. And the physical ability to carry out the whole sequence.
And that capability, that environmental mastery, it comes from one of two places, fundamentally. Either extensive long-term surveillance and planning, which supports the sophisticated intruder idea.
Or intimate daily familiarity, living there, which points toward the family involvement theory.
And when you look at broader crime data, the overwhelming pattern for crimes like this points towards familiarity. Intimate knowledge reduces risk. It builds confidence. You don't guess about acoustics, or which stairs are used 95% of the time, or which storage room is ignored if you live there,
You exploit certainty.
Which drastically increases the capability factor compared to an outsider relying on observation and guesswork.
Okay, let's try and expose some specific gaps or inconsistencies in the timeline that the house's layout allows for. We touch on the cultural aspect, too.
Yes, the cultural pattern of these large American upper-middle-class homes, the emphasis on individual space, privacy.
Kids have their zones, parents have theirs. The size enforces that separation psychologically and physically.
And that cultural norm, that expectation of privacy,
Mm.
it creates an unintended vulnerability, doesn't it? It can delay discovery.
Because there's no expectation of constant checking or shared space.
Right. Respect for privacy, even within a family, even maybe in a crisis initially, could prevent someone from immediately checking those neglected off-limits spaces.
Which leads us to maybe the most probing question about the timeline involving children. JonBenet and Burke, we know they were traveling early the next day. Maybe strict bedtimes were relaxed because of the holidays.
It's plausible.
So if they were up later, could they have interacted, played, maybe gone downstairs for that bowl of pineapple?
Ah, the pineapple. That is the forensic elephant in the room, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the house's layout absolutely protects the ambiguity around it. The size, the quiet, the separation. It creates easy opportunities for unmonitored interactions that would seem totally normal at the time.
Moving between rooms.
Going downstairs to the kitchen, maybe even near the basement entrance, without necessarily making enough noise to reach the master suite.
The distance from Burke's room to the kitchen, for instance?
It's significant. Different level, involves stairs, hallways. But in that dead, quiet, late-night house, maybe not audible upstairs.
But why does the house make admitting those seemingly innocent interactions so difficult later on?
Because after the crime, the pressure, internal, external, from investigators to construct a simple clue narrative would be immense. Everyone was asleep, separated.
A complex timeline is messy.
Extremely messy. A timeline where kids are up, moving around unsupervised, maybe near the kitchen, maybe near the basement. It invites difficult questions. Implications of negligence, maybe accidental harm. Things that become psychologically unbearable, perhaps legally dangerous, to admit later.
So the architecture provides cover.
It provides the spatial possibility for "we don't know" or "everyone was asleep" to become the easiest, most defensible narrative, even if someone knew or suspected otherwise. The physical space allowed for unmonitored activity, which then created perfect psychological cover for anyone needing to simplify or sanitize their memory of that night.
The house itself becomes a kind of vault for suppressed information.
Beautifully put. It enabled the technical truth, we didn't know where she was, to potentially mask a more complicated behavioral or emotional truth about what might have happened in those unmonitored hours. The structural barriers became psychological ones.
Okay, let's try and synthesize this.
Well, I think our deep dive today really shows how the architecture of that house, the sound isolation, the forgotten spaces, the family's own routines, these weren't just background details. They were active elements. They were leveraged, consciously or unconsciously, by the perpetrator to enable the concealment, to delay the discovery, and to maximize the psychological shockwave, starting with that note on the stairs.
So what does this all mean? I guess our analysis suggests the house provided the physical means for this awful act to exist in a sort of spatial limbo, present within the structure but absent from immediate awareness, hidden from perception. And that capacity allowed for the possibility of that technical truth, they didn't know where she was, while potentially concealing a much more complex reality about who knew what, when, and just how deeply the perpetrator understood the intimate geography and habits of that household.
And perhaps when we look at it this way, through this lens of forensic architecture, psychological space, the most profound question isn't just what happened. It's how the very structure of their lives, the physical container of their family, enable these parallel realities, awareness and ignorance, safety and terror, to coexist under one roof. And it maybe pushes us to ask ourselves, how aware are we really of the neglected corners, the unmonitored spaces, the potential for hidden realities within our own lives? Both the physical ones and the psychological ones we choose not to look into too closely.